Welcome to the latest Watercolors Aquarium Gallery podcast, brought to you from the Aquarium Rush Studios in downtown Grand Rapids, Michigan. My name is Ben.
I'm Amy.
And I'm Charles.
Today we're going to have fun. This
Yay.
Conversation is going to be just a super fun topic.
Normally it's miserable, so
I know,
I'm
right?
glad for the relief.
Well, we're not going to get serious, we're not going to get controversial, and we're not going to get overly scientific.
Oh, shoot.
Sorry,
I should scribble out some notes.
For those who can't see what I'm doing, this is the first time I have purposely not put any notes in front of me.
I'm kind of like something's missing from this picture.
I know.
We are talking about dream systems. Like when you're sitting there imagining what are the possibilities? What could I pull off? What would be the coolest way to do this?
Yeah, I think most of us end up thinking more about the tanks we'd like to set up than we do about our actual tanks. Some of the time.
Or if I had these crazy kinds of resources, then it doesn't necessarily mean money.
Yeah.
Time, access to
It's
something.
like time, money, and effort, I think, are the three pillars that will limit what you can do with an
Right.
aquarium.
We're going to
Patience, maybe.
Patience is a big one. Yeah, I don't have much of that sometimes. We're going to loosely base the conversation on talking about a dream planet aquarium and a dream saltwater system or two, some dream breeder setups and some dream situations to make something possible that currently you just can't quite make possible. So let's just start it organically. Amy, if you could do, I'm gonna throw something at you.
Yeah.
Because I bet you got something planned, and I'm probably gonna give it a little twist. If you could do your dream big saltwater aquarium, because I know you always think in the nano way, and
Yeah.
yeah,
But it's mostly about time, money, and effort. If I were
Yeah.
to go saltwater, I would go big.
yeah,
I just don't think that there's a better, easier way to do it. So, to me, if I were really going to get into saltwater, I think I would really lean towards the non-photosynthetic corals.
oh, those are some cool ones.
Yeah, and I don't know what it is. They're more animal-y. They're more,
Yeah.
they're just a really unique type of organism, and
You gotta feed them.
you got to feed them.
Yeah,
So you need a big system. And I think this would be the type of system where I would want a sump that was bigger than the tank.
your touch. I was like immediately. I've seen a couple of those setups, and I had this picture of, okay, which one should we talk about? You are starting the conversation correctly, so just keep going with it.
Yeah.
Like how big? How big would you want your display to be?
Here's what I would think. I would probably do a 125 display, something 6 foot.
Okay.
Yeah, just so I could get the type of livestock I would want to get in there and not feel as bad about it, which
Right.
would probably be a pair of dwarf angelfish, honestly, or maybe a slightly larger angelfish. Big probably one of those 300 or 400 gallon pond tubs.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be it. Like with tons of macroalgae, it would be a saltwater pond.
A giant protein skimmer.
Giant protein skimmer. Anything that I can come up with that I think would spawn in a tank. Coral banded shrimp.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
To help with the feeding.
Maybe 10 damsels or something like that. But those macroalgae themselves produce a lot of stuff.
They do, but most of I guess not. I guess it depends on which ones you're keeping.
We get a lot of the amphipods. That's the word
Yeah.
in our macros.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and those breed too and will produce. But I know a lot of the popular non-photosynthetics want bigger foods. But
Right.
some
Sun
of the
coral
gorgs will take.
They'll take a lot of the phytoplankton.
Yeah.
The sun corals and the dendros, those want zooplankton. So
Yeah, if it could be carnation coral, that would be, I think, the
That's a
dream.
cool one.
Yeah.
that's a cool one. Dendronepthia.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I've seen a lot of really cool refrigerated auto feeding setups. And that would be really fun to set up.
So I think the challenge that you would have with an automated refrigeration feeding setup is when it comes to non-photosynthetic corals, and this is the big drawback on non-photosynthetic corals, because I've seen some small sun coral colonies that can do just fine in a fun little reef tank as a cool addition to a normal reef tank.
Yeah.
And they're fed carefully and individually, but when it comes to feeding the polyps on a non-photosynthetic coral, Each polyp is an individual animal,
Yeah.
and therefore each polyp needs to eat.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Right. So the distribution system, now you could probably pull it off. I'm just thinking through. If you had the refrigeration unit where it would feed the tank and automatically shut off the return pump, so it would all stay in the system, and just blast it with current, so it kept the food particles in suspension as long as possible.
I'm smirking at you because this is exactly what I was thinking.
Okay. Keep using your description.
No,
Sorry, I started to steal your
it's-
thunder there a little bit.
You're not at all. It's just a really fun puzzle to try and solve. Because
Yeah.
with all the controllable stuff we have these days, we should be able to get really close to automating it. Not
Right.
totally. I think
Right.
you would definitely still need to spot feed. I mean, I don't think there's any way around that.
Unless you just resolved yourself to the fact that you're going to let it naturally evolve.
True.
And where those currents are bringing food to the corals, that's where those corals get to multiply and grow.
Yeah. That'd be very cool.
That would be a really sweet setup.
Well, and if you could work out that feeding aspect of it, the other things that become big problems in reef tanks, like algae, you
wouldn't have algae.
you don't need to, because
Right.
you can keep the lights low enough that algae won't survive. So like you can, it's like flipping the whole reef tank thing on its head.
Yeah. Something like some zoster butterflies would be perfect in something
Ooh.
like that, because they're a
That-
deeper water butterfly,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Maybe
if
a
you could-
Sclerosi basslet.
If you could really commit to a deep water sort of biotope, half-hearted biotope,
Right.
that would be a really cool tank.
Right.
And we'll put purple firefish in there too for you, Charles.
for
Yeah,
Charles.
thanks.
Yeah.
I do want to touch on the aspect of this where I think people really underappreciate how much biodiversity in their systems can really make or break some systems.
Yeah.
One of the major rules of ecology is the more diverse an ecosystem is, the more stable it is.
And so what Amy's getting at it with having a big pond as her sump is basically trying to produce as much biodiversity to feed the display system. And that's a strategy that's viable in a quote unquote typical reef aquarium too.
Yeah.
And I think it's a strategy that more people should consider.
We talked a little bit about it in our sharks episode, how, yeah, have your display be what it is, but the total water volume of a system is almost more important than a display in some aspects, like the display size.
Depending on the species you're keeping,
Yeah,
absolutely.
depending on whether or not you can keep the water quality there, because with the amount of food you'd need to put in for, I mean, I think most of it would get taken, but there's always just going to be, it's going to be a high nutrient system if you're doing non-photosynthetics. That would be very difficult in 100 gallons. In 500 gallons, I think it might be doable.
Actually, the really cool display that I saw with non-photosynthetics, and it was very much focusing on sun corals, the display was 40 gallons.
Really?
250 gallons worth of sump.
Wow.
And a protein skimmer that was rated to 400 gallons.
Yeah.
And it was amazing.
I bet.
It was a bright orange and yellow aquarium. The sun coral covered the live rock like an established reef.
That's
It
amazing.
was incredible.
Yeah, I love that. I don't know, something about them, and it might just be because they're really poorly understood that I want to learn about them.
Yeah.
Like I want to be able to see them up close.
That's a completely legitimate reason to want to do a system though. Like,
Yeah. But then it feels like, oh man, I really want to kill these things.
oh no.
But if you look up information, it's just not there. I mean, it's people who have kept a non-photosynthetic tank and have achieved some success. That's really all you can learn from them.
There aren't that many out there. It's that
No.
that the common way to do it today is you put your sun coral in a place that you can get to it easily, and you have to use a syringe or turkey baster and feed each individual polyp,
Yeah.
or it dies. And 3 to 4 times a week.
And that's the strategy that I've seen from pretty much everybody who does it successfully, even
Right.
in large tanks.
Right.
Like I've read accounts of somebody who has like a huge 200-gallon NPS is the abbreviation that I see them call it.
Yep.
And he still feeds every head.
Wow.
Yeah. And he loves doing it.
Yeah.
That's his passion. That's what he wants to do. That's not going to happen for me.
I was like, I can imagine, like, for some people, like the type of people who like to maintain like Zen gardens, like
Yeah.
that would be like the exact same like mental like triggering chemical in the brain.
Yeah.
Or Mr. Miyagi trimming the bonsai tree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, those
absolutely.
routine-based people. I wish I could be a person like
I'm
that.
so not.
I'm a very project-based person. I'm going to leave it until I have this one big thing to do.
Right. So then get back to your display. If you go down to a 120, so you got the 4 foot by 2 foot, instead of that 6 foot long, it's harder to get the current,
True.
the circulation in a 6 foot by 18-inch tank. If you do 4 foot by 2 foot and you put 2 MP60s set up on opposite sides and then on opposite walls, so they're going to go and create that gyre effect. And that feeds, and have that feed for, I don't know, maybe a half hour even. Have those with the return pump off and just those things just blasting it for a while. Those corals are going to get a ton of that food.
Yeah.
And it's going to end up in all kinds of places because you can vary the current. And then at the end of that half hour feeding cycle, you blast the return pumps, have the gyres set up so the return pumps will, or the circulation pumps will move the excess food over to get taken in by the overflow, have that go down into the drain system and feeding first into the algae system where all the pods are going to eat that up and all your shrimp are going to scavenge. I bet that would pull that off.
I would think my experimental version of this, which is ridiculous, is that little 1 gallon jar. But every night, the macroalgae that are in there produce enough whatever they produce that tank looks like it's full of bubbles. But the reason I know it's not bubbles is because I've got Aptasia in there that will grab them and eat them. You can see them kind of going down into them.
Wow.
So like the theory is there that they will produce enough that there will be food there for coral to catch.
Right.
But it's going to take a lot of water to prove that theory.
I think we need to draw this tank up.
I was like, I know I'm being quiet, but watching you two like process through is just like way too fascinating to interrupt.
Yeah, I just bought a house, so I'm thinking like, oh, what systems can I do now that I have a basement?
Right. Even if you didn't automate the feeding, you're still feeding frozen food.
Yeah.
If you fed it 5 to 7 days a week, once or twice a day, that's not outrageous.
No.
And that would be enough that you wouldn't necessarily have to automate feeding if you set it up with an apex and a feeding cycle.
Yeah.
We're going to draw this one up. I love this idea.
Yeah,
We might just do a YouTube video with like, okay, here's our spec. Somebody try it.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll try it here.
Yeah, that's what I've been turning over in my head lately. That's my dream system right now.
That's pretty sweet.
All right.
I love it.
All right, what other saltwater systems can we talk about then that aren't that specific or are in different ways?
I would love to do a 120, the 4 by 2 foot with a giant carpet anemone and the pair of blue stripe clowns that I have.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, it's such a great contrast to what I was just talking about because the simplicity is what is beautiful about a system like that.
Yeah. And then, like, if I was going to do a system like this, regardless of, like, for real, I would probably shell out to get one of the weird color varieties of a carpet anemone too, just because there's going to be like 3 things in the tank.
Yeah. And there are some really cool ones that nobody gets access to because they eat everything.
Yeah.
A giant carpet anemone that can get close to 2 feet in diameter.
Yes.
Oh, it'd be amazing.
I mean, it would if it was fed well and happy, I think it would pretty much fill that tank.
It should.
Yeah.
Yeah, it should.
That's why I want the 4 by 2 foot version so that it can stretch out. That
would be beautiful. And those blue stripes, how are they looking?
Their blue is definitely more blue than when I got them.
Yay.
The female is probably about twice as big as from when I got her. And the male is probably like 50% bigger than when I got him.
That's amazing.
I'll have to take video for the YouTube channel, and I plan to in the very near future.
I would love to see it.
So that system could be way more set up like a very traditional reef. I'd still want a sump on it.
Yep.
It wouldn't have to be outrageous lighting.
No.
They don't need super high light. They need good light.
A Kessel spotlight, maybe?
Yeah.
Right
Kessel
on it.
spot right in the middle.
See,
Ooh.
now you're speaking my language.
Yeah, and just that single Kessel so it shades the... Oh, that's perfect.
I'm nodding my head like, yeah, that's exactly what I want.
That like ripple shimmery effect off of that would be so pretty.
Get some really nice, like, I know it's so hard to find, but get some really nice white sand underneath it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we should do a spot on our... So here at the shop in the gallery, we are in the process of setting up one of the Red Sea Reefer 350s, which is the 36-inch Red Sea Reefer Aquarium. No, 48-inch. It is 48-inch, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
48-inch. It's essentially a 75-gallon footprint. No, because it's 20 inches front to back. It's 90 gallons. Anyway, we're setting up a Red Sea Reefer 350 as a black saddleback clownfish display. Maybe we should spotlight it.
Yeah, that would be cool. That doesn't come with lights.
It does not.
Okay.
You have an option with that system to get it with or without lights.
Yeah, even if it was two shafts coming and we
Yeah,
had like
that's
a
true.
big rock pile and a smaller one.
Right? Could be fun.
Yeah.
We don't have the marine Kessels on display anywhere.
No, that's true.
Would be a really good application for that.
Yeah, Ben, we don't.
What?
That's Charles's favorite light. Come on.
The Kessels they have such a cool look. They have such an important place. Like, it's not necessarily my go-to light, but when you want to create a certain effect, the Kessel does it better than anything for that, if that's the look you're going for.
Quick preview. We will be producing some biotope videos where a Kessel light is very central.
And it looks incredible.
It looks exactly like a shaft of sunlight through a river.
Yeah,
It's beautiful.
it's fantastic.
Yeah, no, that's a great setup. That's one I've turned over a little bit too, although I think I would go with skunk clowns.
Yeah, that's fair. To be honest, before I got the blue stripe clowns, I would have too. But now that I have them and now that I'm like attached to these individual ones, I'm like, no, I would just upgrade them to a bigger tank if I could.
Yeah, they deserve it.
I would do a similar setup with either saddlebacks or McCullochs.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm so excited for the ones we got in because I'm putting this particular comment in the podcast because my wife, back when we were first lived together, I have talked about, this was back when they cost like $400 each.
Right.
And I seriously had considered it. And she was like, we're poor college students. What are you doing? What are you doing?
thinking?
And so
I
I
could buy textbooks this semester, or
I was kind of like, all right, you're making a lot of sense. So,
no, your poor wife. She doesn't deserve that.
no. So then, Ben and I finally were like, all right, we're going to get some McCullochs for the store because we want them.
Yes. Yeah, I've wanted those fish for a long time. I'm pretty excited about them too. I tried them once 6 years ago, and I'll just say it this way. The position that I was in at the time and the way things were going at the time, I did not give them the attention they deserved in the store that I owned at the time. So it didn't go well because
Wrong time, wrong place.
Wrong time, wrong place, yeah. McCullochs are really tough to pair up.
Yeah.
Once they pair up, that bond is solid, but getting that bond established, you got one of two things is going to happen. They're going to bond or they're going to kill each other. And you don't have much time to figure out which one is which.
Yeah, that'll be fun. But it's going to happen.
It's going to happen. Right.
I don't think you could go wrong with any wild clowns in that setup, though. The people who want bigger fish, a pair of maroons in that tank, that would be a great showcase.
Yeah, and they work in a carpet anemone as well.
Yeah, I was going to say those blue stripes are going to get big too.
How big do they get?
Depending on who you talk to, they are either the second largest or the largest species of clown.
Really? Because the
Larger than a maroon?
they get like 8 inches, right?
They get the established length for a blue stripe in the wild is like 7 inches.
Wow.
I have seen a female maroon clown closer to 9.
That's in captivity.
Good call.
So I guess the blue stripes theoretically in captivity could achieve greater.
Who knows?
Yeah. I guess we'll find out over the next 10 to 15 years.
Yeah. So I had to upgrade to a 400-gallon tank.
Yeah, if it was for a foot-long clownfish, would you be upset?
No.
No.
It's like, that's something that, like, if you could pull that off, you would be like in another block and you could see that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That would be very cool.
Yeah.
All right,
Yep.
Ben, what's your dream saltwater setup?
So mine is I'm taking a little different approach to it because I've had so many saltwater setups that now my dream system has a little bit more to do with methodology than it does with what the final product is. And for me, the final product is going to be just a really cool 120 gallon 4 foot by 2 foot reef tank with just the right stuff in it. But the way that I get there is what I've often dreamed. I've laid awake at night thinking, how could I make this work?
Because you've already kept all the livestock you would want in there, so that's not the dream.
No, that's not the dream. But if I could pull off running an RO system with rainwater.
Oh.
So I have a 2-story house, and the sump would be in the basement. And in my house was built in 1923, and so with the slope of the roof, there's always these little cubbies all over the place. So there's this little cavity upstairs where I could put some rainwater collection barrels coming off of the downspouts or the gutters on the house that fed those rainwater collection barrels. The reason I would want that up on the second floor is because an RO system is based on water pressure. You need the pressure to push the water through the RO membrane. And I don't know if you'd get enough pressure with that, but if I had 200 gallons of water up on the second story, pushed through a 3/4 inch pipe into the RO system in the basement, that might be the pressure to give me good quality RO water from the rainwater system.
It's a really interesting thought. Yeah, because the pipes we'd normally be getting RO from are already pressurized. They just go in there.
Yeah. I know somebody out there can, in about 32 seconds, who knows trigonometry, could tell me what the water pressure is and what it would reduce down to as the level in those 200-gallon barrels went down. And that's somebody who knows that kind of math could probably do that and tell me.
Please contact us.
Yes.
It's podcast@watercolorsaquariumgallery.com. We'd love to see your work.
Yeah. And I know it would be a matter of making how much water pressure you'd have to create with how tall your holding tank would be up on the second floor to put the pressure to push water through an RO membrane. That also would give me all the rainwater I want to feed my freshwater systems that we'll get to soon. But there's my little...
That would be a really cool idea. RO is so wasteful.
Exactly.
And that would... Plus, you'd already have water that... You'd be stripping less out.
Those
right?
RO membranes would last for 10 years.
Yeah, because the rainwater already barely has anything in it. So you'd just be pretty much just polishing it and being able to use it directly.
You may even be able to get away with pushing rainwater through a sediment filter and a carbon filter. And I haven't done enough water analysis testing of the rainwater that we have here to see if that's all that it would take. But to feed a reef system, either through an RO system or just feed the whole reef system with rainwater, that's one of my dream systems.
And that's a way to run several displays in your house and have it sustainable and not have to feel bad.
Right. It's not as big of a deal here in a place like Michigan.
Right.
We do not have a water shortage in Michigan. Now, still, energy goes into making that water safe for human consumption. So we do want to be aware of the amount of water that we're using. If we lived in California, I would feel really guilty using an RO system.
Yeah.
Here in Michigan, I don't have those same feelings other than the energy used in producing RO water.
Like that water is inherently valuable, but
yeah. But imagine if you had a rainwater system feeding your aquarium and solar panels running them. Mm-hmm. That would be cool.
Yeah, that is one of the big guilt points of an aquarium is
it's energy use.
It is. Yeah. And not the most, but it is.
Right.
Yeah. I think this is a worthwhile time for me to bring up that I had a conversation recently where someone mentioned to me that they've never done saltwater because specifically for the reason that we have a limited amount of fresh water in the world. And I was like, that's a legitimate point, and I'm not trying to minimize that in any way, shape, or form. We think about that a lot here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we have salted roads.
We do have salted roads.
That does way more to our local watershed than we can ever do.
Yes. And then, but there's another negative to me doesn't make a positive.
Yeah, I know.
But when we're using, one of the things about the Great Lakes watershed and the communities that use the water from the Great Lakes watershed, we're recycling fresh water here. Those places that have water piped in, or for example, California or Las Vegas is using water that rained down on Colorado. Right. By the way, little side note about Colorado that you might find interesting. It is illegal to use a rainwater collection system in the state of Colorado. It's not your water.
I'm sorry?
Right. That water belongs
To the sky?
the state of Colorado and to the state of Nevada. Nevada has leased the rainwater. Yes, you cannot use a rainwater collection. So that's water
icky.
used in Las Vegas comes from Colorado. It comes from a completely different watershed, and it's directed there. The Great Lakes watershed, when we get our water, we pull it out of Lake Michigan. We use it in an aquarium. We do our water change. We put it back down the drain. It goes to the Grand Rapids water treatment system and goes back into the Grand River and flows back into Lake Michigan. So the energy use is a thing, but the freshwater resource here, we are just a part of it. We
Yeah.
are not using it up.
Yeah, and this wasn't a point of saying, this wasn't a whataboutism argument of, well, saltwater here, saltwater there. It was more of just I think that's a much more worthwhile environmental fight to have.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
because I'm like, having that change would have a huge effect.
Well,
Whereas,
And you could always make the argument that one beef farm uses, but we won't get into that.
yeah, I was like, I'm
Remember,
not
we're
trying-
not going to get controversial here,
Oh
guys.
my gosh, you're so
We're just
tempting,
having fun
though.
tonight.
Oh, right. Okay.
fun.
I mean, one thing we can say about our water use is that our RO wastewater does not all go to waste.
Right.
Because we are reusing it in our cichlid systems.
And in some of our rinse and wash bins.
Exactly.
Yep.
So we do the best we can. But
We try.
that system you're talking about sounds fantastic, and it would definitely alleviate some of the... I mean, to be self-sustaining is like the dream, right?
It is. Absolutely.
So-
that would be so cool.
yeah.
And I
Yeah.
do have to admit that we're sitting up here in the studio at the Watercolors Aquarium Gallery, and as I look up to my right, coming out of the ceiling is a rainwater drain made of PVC pipe that goes to another section of the building. And if I could tap into that, there's
Which
some
would be really
It'd be
easy.
easy. I know how to plumb things. I don't know,
Alright.
maybe someday.
All right. Now we're really thinking.
And he brought this up to me the other day, and now having him talk about this RO system, I'm like, oh, that's why it's on his mind.
That
All
is
right, I got it.
cool.
I just
Very
went
cool.
public. I hope the landlord isn't listening.
All right. Any comments about what's going to go inside that tank?
For me, mostly it is LPS corals. Those really are my favorite. The big, colorful, slow-growing stuff.
The squishy ones.
The squishy ones.
The
Yeah.
big kahunas.
Yeah, I love acans, and I love my bubble coral. If you haven't been out of the gallery to see my bubble coral, I've had it for 16 years.
I think you're up to like 17 now.
Nah, that's probably true. I've been saying that for more than a year now.
Yeah.
Yeah. But probably just 2 or 3 species of coral, just really big ones.
Yeah.
I want to try to do a system someday that rather than having one of these and one of these and one of these and one of these, just focuses, kind of like Charles's anemone system that just focuses on one anemone. Let's focus on just one giant coral with maybe an accent here or there.
Do you have an idea of what that would be if you could have the one?
It couldn't be just one, but it would be a bubble coral
Yeah.
and probably some kind of an acan
Cool.
that's got that amazing color.
Mm-hmm.
And then the rosette version of the hammer coral, branching hammer coral with a
Which is
rosette pattern.
beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So.
Any fish or just coral?
Oh, it would be full of fish. Actually, it would be focused on fish. So the system. Okay, so I might as well go into the way.
Yeah,
this
I mean,
is, right.
this is the whole purpose of the discussion. So
I would
indulge.
Yes. So the tank could be up in my dining room, and I'm fortunate enough to have a basement with a heat run right below where the tank would be, where I could plumb the system down into the basement, and probably 1,000 gallons worth of sump
Sweet.
or more, so that I could load the tank with fish. And Swallowsea basslets would be a highlight, or candy.
Cool.
Mm-hmm. Something
Cool.
like that. Because of the size of the tank, I would be limited on which tangs I could do, but because of the water volume, I could do a whole bunch of them.
Yeah.
Yep. But then it'd be a lot of the normal. Like I love purple tangs. I still love yellow tangs, and I think the combination works really well.
Definitely.
Who could have guessed the guy that has them in the display tank downstairs likes
Those
them
two
together?
together are amazing.
Yeah. I would probably want to do some experimentation, and I want to do that here pretty soon, actually, with some of the dwarf angels. We look at dwarf angels as being mostly not reef safe. With a few of them, we can get away with, like a coral beauty and a flame angel.
Yeah.
But really, it's dwarf angels and a lot of angelfish are selective feeders. So if we start figuring out, okay, maybe this dwarf angel only likes SPS corals or only wants to eat zoanthids but won't touch LPS corals, and do some experimentation on just the right dwarf angel to put in there. And the one that I would focus on is Centropies multicolor.
I don't think I know that angel.
Oh, they're a beautiful little white and yellow and blue.
Does it have a common name?
The multicolor angel.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I'm going to look up.
Bum, bum,
Yep.
bum, bum.
So a trio or at least a pair of multicolored angels.
This is your dream
Oh,
tank. Say
that's
at least a
neat.
trio.
Well, I would only say a trio if I know that they'll do an actual harem, because, as we know, with reef fish, some of them pair and some of them harem,
Yeah.
right? So a pair of Swallowsea basslets, they don't harem. A pair or harem of multicolor angels. A group of probably Dispar anthias. A pile of neon cleaner gobies.
Yeah.
We were just talking about those,
Yeah.
me and Amy earlier.
Yep.
I was discussing the customer that we had that didn't have a lot of money to throw at his tank, but just kept buying neon cleaner gobies. Do you remember that?
Mhm.
And I couldn't blame him because he just loved them, and
Yeah,
they're amazing.
they're
They're so
great.
fun.
A pair of leopard wrasses. Who am I missing? I'm missing somebody else that would be in that tank. Oh, some of the flash and fairy wrasses to mix in with the group of Dispar anthias. Yeah, that's it.
I just have to say, I looked up Centropide multicolor,
Mm-hmm.
and I had never seen this fish before. This is very unusual. White is weird
Yeah,
in a reef
they're
tank.
deep water.
And it looks like somebody took a coral beauty and just erased part of it.
Yeah.
That's a really cool fish.
I had a pair of them about 5 or 6 years ago. And it's one of those fish from wholesalers that, from some wholesalers, every once in a while they have them on their list and they would retail for about $400 a piece. And from a couple of other wholesalers, they have them on their list regularly and they'd retail for about $100 a piece. And I don't know why. It has to just be with which collectors they
Yeah,
go through.
it must be just their contacts.
Yeah.
But
So yeah, that's my dream.
that sounds really cool.
Yep, my dream reef tank.
And I love the big sump.
Yeah.
But people want that sort of density in their reef tanks. They want it to look like, when you look at a reef, it's got fish everywhere and
It looks overcrowded.
They're packed together, and people want to achieve that in their tanks. You
Right.
can't do that in 40 gallons. You
Right.
can't really even do that in 100 gallons.
Right.
You got to have the volume.
But if you have 1,200 gallons with a 120-gallon display, it'd be
You can do
so
it.
cool.
Yeah, very cool. I love that.
With our reef tank display up front, if we plumbed that into the basement,
Oh, we could.
We do have room in the basement right there.
bum, 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 bum.
We could even plumb it right into, we've got that big 400-gallon tub.
We do.
Listen,
and feed
Amy.
a breeder system. All right.
All right. And
This is getting no.
I mean, but if that's
wait,
going to be a dream system,
that's kind of the point of this discussion.
we
isn't
have
it?
not talked about a breeder saltwater system, which is not an easy to achieve
Yeah.
system, but maybe a dream system for some of us here.
There's
Have you ever thought about that,
something about that volume.
From time to time, but I don't normally have ambitious goals about what I want to breed. It's normally like dottybacks and clownfish because those are the fish I like.
True.
For me, it is definitely breeding dwarf angels.
Yeah.
That's yep. If we could say, okay, we are going to dedicate a space to becoming the place that breeds X group of saltwater fish, it would be we are the dwarf angel breeding place.
What would it take to do that?
We gotta see what Biota will let us learn from them. Biota is a place that successfully does a couple of different species of dwarf angels. We get their tank raised coral beauties from them, and they're amazing
And adorable.
and adorable. Yeah,
And I've never had a problem with them. I've never really had a problem with any coral beauty, but these guys are solid.
they're solid. Ore does the Centropage argi, the pygmy angels from the Caribbean,
And the Flamemax.
and Flameax. Yeah,
Is anyone doing the Atlantic pygmy angel right now?
that's the
That's
Centropage
argi.
argi. That's
Oh,
the
thank you.
Caribbean. Yeah.
That must be why my brain went right
Yeah.
to it. Oops. Yeah, that's a personal favorite for me. I don't know why. I just like them.
Because they're cute.
Well, that and they just like a coral beauty to me acts like a small angelfish, if that makes sense. The Atlantic pygmy angelfish does not act like a little pink angelfish.
It doesn't know how small it is.
It's definitely like a chihuahua. Like
Cool. All right. Well, then,
So-
what's next? Freshwater.
I think we shift the focus here to freshwater a little bit.
Okay. Ooh.
That's my fish. I had a pair. They were awesome.
Sorry, the studio audience is showing us amazing pictures of Centropage multicolor.
he's basically holding up the equivalent of like a banner, like this is the fish.
Yeah.
Like
It looks more like a centerfold in that picture.
I know where to get them, and we could get them, but I don't like the place that carries them.
Our display needs dwarf angels.
I know. We'll see.
We'll see. Anyway.
so
All right,
freshwater.
so shifting over to freshwater. So Amy went first with saltwater. So we're gonna let Charles go first with freshwater. So and you can say the topic here is freshwater, whether you're talking about your ultimate breeding system or a display, whatever. Like, I really want to.
Yeah. So everyone here knows I really like the bettas.
No.
Yeah. So I have.
I'm so happy about that, by the way.
Me too. Sorry, I'm adjusting this because I can't hear myself. There we go. So I have two ideas in mind, and I haven't quite figured out which one would display a betta better, or a group of them. One of them was inspired by something on I think it was TikTok. Melissa sent it to me. And it's basically like this concept of like an indoor pond where it's but it's like a depression in the floor, and then you have a platform in the middle of it with just like an easy chair so you can just watch your fish.
Oh, nice.
And I'm I feel like that strategy would work really well with bettas because they are so surface oriented, at least the bubble nesting species. The other idea I had was basically a 6 or 8 foot long tank that is custom made to be only like 12 inches wide and 8 inches tall. And then you have basically try to make it look like the edge of a pond in Thailand, and you have grass growing in the back so that they're peeking out and building their nests. I think that one would display them better.
Borderline paludarium.
Yeah. And I was just I feel like having a small group of Betta smeridina would just really work in a system like that.
What would be the betta?
I have a soft spot for the smeridinas, but if the betta right now, and it's going to be for a long time, is betta stickos. I jokingly when I was writing the list for this, I literally wrote down any tank with betta stickos.
I think we might need to do an offshoot of this. These are our dream systems. We might need to do our 5 dream fish. Yeah, that would be really fun.
Yeah.
Not that you can't talk about this here, because we can talk. I mean, you can. I'm sure you could talk about betta stickos a million times.
Oh yeah.
Write that down. That's a good idea.
I don't have any notes either.
What? Hey, Robbie, help us remember that. Sorry, I just reached out to the studio audience for assistance.
Assistance.
Yep. Top 5 dream aquarium fish. I love that.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's got to
sorry.
be something you've never kept before. Yeah.
Right. And not necessarily. It could be if you've had your dream fish and just want it back.
Yeah. Literally the fish that got away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I will admit that betta stickos is also in the Smeridina complex. Like, I'm going to say complex loosely here. When you're looking at the Splendens complex, there's actually genetically, there's a couple, what we now call Smeridina is probably like 4 species, and betta stickos. And they definitely group together. And then there's a secondary grouping, which is Splendens and Embellus and everyone else in the complex.
Mahacanensis and
Siam orientalis.
That's right.
Yep. So when I say, I should say Smeridina clade, but betta stickos kind of appeases my, I don't know what it is about the Smeridina clade, but they have a body type that just really looks,
Betta-y?
yeah, like it's just aesthetically pleasing to me.
Right.
Whereas like a Splendens, like a wild type Splendens or a Mahacanensis, they're pretty stocky.
True. Yeah.
Not as stocky as like the captive bred strains, but more so than a Smeridina. And there's just something, they just look a little bit more like a ballet dancer. you get what I'm saying?
Right. As opposed to like a sumo wrestler.
Yeah. And so I really like the Smeridinas.
That would be a great setup to see sort of their territorial behavior.
Yeah, I really want to see that.
We're usually looking to squash it as much as possible, but to have several males maintaining different nests over the length of that tank would be really, really cool.
Yeah, and also I'm kind of the opinion, and this plays into my dream like breeding system. It's kind of semi interconnected to this, and I'll get to that when we get to that. But I love the idea of humans are really bad at like matchmaking for fish, and a system like that would allow at least some of my broodstock to pick their own mates.
Oh yeah. Especially if you could end up, and this would be even harder because sitkos are very hard to find now.
Yeah.
But to find them from multiple sources where you know the genetics weren't the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As long as the collection location was the same, put them in the system and let them decide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Imagine a tank where you have 2 fish that are going to pair off and they decided they don't like each other. And instead of killing their mate, they just chase them away and they have a place to go.
Yeah.
And find another one?
Right. So that touches on a thing that as aquarists we have this notion that 2 fish fight until one kills the other, because that's what happens in an aquarium.
Yeah.
That almost never happens in nature. When 2 fish fight in nature, the loser just goes and finds another place.
Yeah, and people fighting is high energy stuff. Like you're not going to waste time and energy doing something you don't need to do, or you're not going to stick around to die.
Yeah.
It's extremely expensive from a metabolism standpoint. I mean, to the amount of resources you have to waste trying to fight something.
Yeah, even if you're the winner, like there's a reason why there's a point where you're like, all right, you're out of my territory. Just keep going. Like you're good.
The loser would just leave before it even got to throwing punches. I mean,
You're very clearly bigger than me.
Aggression is a conversation we need to have. Like, we could probably do a whole podcast about aggression triggers, but usually it's territory driven.
Yeah.
And if you have, this mean asshole fish that just, he won't let anyone, like, that fish is just, yes, it has selected this entire tank as its territory, as is its right.
Yeah. Think of how big its territory would be in the wild.
Yeah, it probably wouldn't be 3 inches of space.
Much bigger than that 55-gallon tank.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like the analogy I like to throw out at people is that like you set this fish up in your tank. It has established this as a home. Like when you move in somewhere, you make it your own, and then suddenly your landlord's like, all right, so we're making room for someone else. Are you really going to be happy about that? You're like, I just got settled in. I know where everything goes.
Yeah, like, okay, fine. If the squirrels make a home in the attic, whatever. If there's ants on the floor, whatever. But if another person is in my bathroom...
Yeah, they're going to try to move my mac and cheese?
Yeah, I'm probably going to hit them with a baseball bat because they shouldn't be there.
Yeah. The birds can be on the porch, but my brother needs to go.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds about right.
So anyways.
Yeah, I like that. Sounds like an amazing system.
It would be really fun.
But this particular system is why I've been eyeballing that giant hair grass so much lately.
That'd be
Because that's what I've been thinking in the back of my head, because that's what I want to grow. Like that has the look of something I want to grow up and out of the water.
Right.
That's the plant I think of when I hear the term marginal plant.
I just like the name.
Giant hair grass.
Well, no, the scientific name. Elocris montevideensis.
Fun to say.
Right.
And Montevideo's in
Montevideo is in Uruguay. Yep.
Cool.
Yep.
What a cool place.
I know. I want to
Uruguay?
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
True.
All right, Amy, what's your freshwater?
I don't know that I have a specific stock or tank or something like that that's on my list, but I would love a more bioactive freshwater system. I think that's really like where my goals would lie there.
Expand on that.
I think that in reef tanks we really appreciate it, where you can have a full ecosystem with organisms at every level of it. Our freshwater tanks, just by definition, we're not using live rock. They tend to be a little more sterile, our freshwater tanks. So we don't have we don't have small organisms. We have microorganisms like bacteria, but if we're really loading them with fish, oftentimes we don't even have a lot of that. So I think the dream would be to seed a freshwater ecosystem with more small organisms before starting it. As in scuds and shrimp and everything like that. Give it a chance to get ahead, plant it heavily, give them hiding places. It might even be a freshwater refugium. But I don't know how you would achieve a truly bioactive freshwater ecosystem in the way that we keep freshwater tanks right now.
I think a lot of it would boil down to just stocking your tank more like you would a reef tank, because we definitely stock bioload less in a reef tank than we do in the typical freshwater aquarium.
Somehow we'd have to figure out a way to have somebody in South America take a little sample of dirt from the bottom of a stream.
Although
and ship it.
I wonder if we could do that with our own. The temperature might be an issue, but it might be worth it to try.
Our creatures here are programmed to shut down every 6 months.
I mean, even still, though, you could, if we gave it, because it's sort of assumed that a reef tank takes 4 weeks or whatever in a cycle. If you gave a freshwater tank 4 full weeks, threw in scuds, neocaridina shrimp, moina, every single invertebrate that you can find, there might be enough that you'd have a little bit of live food in there if you stocked it lightly.
Especially if you went with live plants that came out of one of the Florida farms where you don't know what kind of spores, eggs, critters are going to come along with it.
Yeah, it's a messy tank, but I think there would be a lot of benefits to it.
Has anyone listening to this podcast ever actually looked at a pond though? What,
to see how nasty it looks?
Yeah, that's my point. Those are the type of environments these fish would be living in the wild. A lot of them would be living in clear water streams, but a lot of the fish we keep live in ponds.
The big factor that contributes to that dirty, quote unquote, dirty look is the algae growth they have in those ponds, and those ponds are receiving tremendous amounts of sunlight.
Yeah,
and so I think you could get some of the biodiversity without necessarily getting the scummy look, because we could control the light.
Yeah, but I kind of like this. We've talked about this before. I kind of like the algae. It's just extra biodiversity in my tank, so I appreciate it, especially for someone who's my purpose is breeding. Like that extra little bit helps me a lot. But I look at a lot of display tanks and I think they just look a little too sterile. Like I don't like lawns.
I think that's a whole topic for
That's another day.
yeah.
But I think there's much to be explored there. The way that we have with reef tanks, where you can go from reef tanks run the spectrum from let's throw everything in there and it's a mess to super pristine. But even at the pristine level, I think they're still more biologically active than our freshwater tanks are.
Does lava rock, does that harden the water? What's it made of?
I think
It's not. It's inert.
Yeah.
No, it's not inert. It is not calcium carbonate.
no.
So no, it does not harden the water. It's going to mineralize it in some ways, but
I've thought about it as live rock before.
Yeah, we've had this discussion.
you're going
before.
to get that would have a lot of the effect.
But
I still can't get past the part of the reason good old fashioned live rock works so well is because it's tropical organisms.
yeah.
And I'm trying to figure out how to achieve that.
I think it would just need to be seeding and time.
Yeah.
I wonder if you spent a little bit of time, take a couple pieces of lava rock to your favorite stream, lake, swamp.
Yeah.
Put them in there in next spring.
See what happens.
And next September, before it starts to get cold, take them out, pop them in an aquarium, and use that as your seed.
It's
It
an
would be
interesting
seeded
thought.
with all kinds of. You'd have your nitrifying bacteria. I mean, you'd be starting to cycle that aquarium immediately because the bacteria would colonize that. Whether you would get organisms to colonize that can handle the tropical temperatures we're going to try to emulate
Yeah, year round.
year round that would be cool.
It's an interesting thought.
I don't know what the legality of doing that, so I'm technically not suggesting you do that, but I'm suggesting you give it a try.
Not to mention that
This is all entirely theoretical.
any disease could come in, and you do have to be very cautious with that sort of thing.
But if you're gonna do your 4-week thing, most diseases, most parasites are gonna have to go through that life cycle, and the ones that are gonna affect fish are gonna do the same thing, and the warmer temperatures are probably gonna speed up that metabolism. So
Yeah.
I think if you're gonna introduce something negative, I think you're right.
Yeah.
I do think that you might not need to even think about it that way at all because saltwater habitats are inherently fairly stable and reliable, whereas freshwater habitats are not. So a lot of the organisms that are in them are designed to like deal with the fact that every once in a while the river dries up.
That's true.
So maybe it's just artificially seeding them in with like, because I know a lot of like laboratory supply companies would probably have a lot of these organisms we're looking for. And I think just starting them off that way, like that's how I got my original Moina culture, was I bought it from a laboratory supply company.
Interesting.
Yeah. There's a lot to be explored there. Even the readily available freshwater invertebrates, I think you could explore a lot of. Scuds and Neocaridina would be great for breaking down algae and making them available to other organisms. They would also be great live food.
Can I amend my dream beta system and add shrimp in there? Because this is a great idea I did not think about.
We passed it. We moved on, Charles.
Nope, you're not allowed to
You're
do
set
that
in
anymore.
Because that's a great idea. Like I
Yeah.
did not process that as a possibility.
Well, the reason that I've kind of come to think of it as one is because in my puffer tank, I've got a colony of Neos that does well. Because it's planted, there's lots of driftwood, and he's not very smart.
Yeah.
So
I think he's smart. He's just not agile.
no, and he knows I'm gonna feed him, so
Yeah, that's true.
he doesn't really care
He's
that much.
spoiled.
And he can't get into the driftwood clumps where they can,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
he eats one every once in a while, and that's fine.
I think it's notable that when you look at downstairs in our plant propagation area, we've used topsoil in some of our systems, and in those systems where we use topsoil, which is supposed to be sterilized, we have some worms and critters that show up in those tanks that don't show up in other tanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been interesting.
Yeah.
But we were so focused on fish. We load it up, and everything else goes by the wayside.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you think about freshwater habitats, they're definitely not unless it's like a big stream, they're usually not densely populated. And when they are, it's not for
like
very
reef.
long. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when they are, it's not for very long.
Right.
And yeah, in aquariums, it's the opposite.
Right.
We keep few fish in our reef tanks and load up our freshwater tanks with as many as we can fit because we can do those water changes and we can make up for it.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Amy, you're making a lot of sense right now.
All right. Well, that's all I
a
have
cool
to say about
system. I like
freshwater. The only other thing is I've considered at some point doing a Dutch style, which might be what I do with my 20-gallon next.
All right, so I'm going to talk about my freshwater system, and then we're going to get into freshwater displays.
Yeah.
And then we're going to talk about your Dutch system, okay? And actually, my freshwater system goes right along with what I was talking about with saltwater, and that's doing a rainwater collection system for soft water and soft acidic water fish. So still going with the all rainwater collection and whatever fish. So here and maybe this is because in West Michigan, our tap water comes out like rock, liquid rock. And so a lot of those fish that are some of my favorites, and whether they're my favorites because I can't really do what I want to with them because of our tap water, or they're my favorites because I genuinely like them. Like apistos and wild type bettas and some of those, like a Tucano tetra. Yeah. That's my favorite tetra. But they're really hard to keep in West Michigan tap water because there's some of the few ones that come from a pH of around 6. And there's a big line between a pH of 7 and a pH of 6.
Yeah. For people who aren't familiar with chemistry, the difference between each number is like, I think it's what's exponential.
Yeah, exponential.
Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. So the difference between 6 and 7 is huge, and the difference between 6 and 5 is bigger.
Right. The difference between 6 and 7 is like the difference between 10 and 100. And the difference between... So then down to 5 is from 7 to 5 would be 10 to 1,000.
Yeah.
That's that exponential change that happens.
So anyways,
Right.
just wanted to discuss that to frame this for people.
Yeah. So get some major rainwater barrel collection systems going. Fed somehow, even in the winter, it thaws enough in the winter that I could probably fill them. But at the same time, and I've thought this through actually. So all of those freshwater ecosystems that have those high and low, or those super low pHs and super soft water have rainy seasons and dry seasons. So if you had that all hooked up and automated, or maybe even just semi-automated into your rainwater collection systems, you would get less rainwater in the winter and naturally then reduce the number of water changes that you did during the winter. As the rain increases in the spring, you'd have that wetter period, do bigger water changes. So
and a natural breeding season.
Natural breeding seasons. So breeding apistos, breeding something like a Tucano tetra, breeding those wild type bettas. That's the system I lie awake at night and try and figure out how to design in my head.
Yeah.
Yep. With rainwater.
And that would be, once you set it up, so low effort, so low maintenance.
It'd be so cool and so different than what we're used to seeing here.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
That would be so cool.
Yep.
I'm looking at these PVC pipes again.
I know, right?
You'll never look at PVC the same.
There's already a coupler right there.
I know, in
right?
the exact spot
So
you'd need it
somebody
to
already
be.
cut it once. And actually, it just wasn't long enough. But if I cut it, I mean, when we had to take it apart again, all the landlord would ever see is, oh, there's an extra coupler. He'd never notice that.
Nobody would ever notice.
Don't tell him.
He's not listening to this
I hope
podcast, is he? If he is, if he's gotten this far into our podcast, he's fine with it. So I'm taking that as implicit agreement.
I'm just picturing him being like, why hasn't he done that yet?
That would be nice.
Right. When I sit here at my desk, my office happens to be up in the recording studio portion of the building, and I hear it rain and I hear the water flow through that pipe. I think, how many gallons is that? All right. On to the display section. Now we're switching from, here's these really cool systems. Here's these really cool, like, we want to breed this fish, or we want to figure out a creative way to keep this. what's the look you want to go for? Like, I want something in my living room that people are going to walk into and go, whoa. Freshwater.
Yeah. Well, I just upgraded my 40 breeder to a 64-gallon long rimless tank, which is a really weird oddball size, but it's awesome. And I'm developing that one a pretty unique nature style aquarium, roughly. So I think about the other styles of planted aquarium, and those I haven't really gotten into some of those more controlled, more precise styles. So that's first why I mentioned Dutch, but an Iwagumi would be amazing, or like a strict. I'm gonna figure out what all the rocks are named and because it is that specific.
Oh yeah.
That type of nerdy planted tank is probably my next
You're going to
move.
spend a year finding the right rocks.
I'm thinking about it.
Yeah,
it's
I love
either
it.
that or a Dutch style with just the right stem plants.
For those of you who don't know, explain the Dutch style.
So the Dutch style aquarium is sort of defined by really tight groupings of specimen plants, where you're going to have like sections that are very distinct of these different plants to showcase each individual. And so for me, it would probably be mainly stem plants. That's an area that doesn't really do as well in my bigger tanks. So it would be that, like a collection of those plants that I really love.
If you could picture a well-groomed English garden,
Exactly.
that's a Dutch style aquarium, where it's not necessarily in rows, but it's very structured and organized. And the competitive aquascapers doing the Dutch style, it's all about placement, how those groupings are, where they are placed in the aquarium, and how they are trimmed.
Yeah,
They need to be trimmed like a bonsai tree.
and little to no hardscape, so it's not necessarily, it's not as artistic, it's much more technical.
Yeah, thick and lush.
Yeah, it's about the precision of getting your plants to maximum health and organization. So there's a lot of control.
Amy, I just
there.
don't see that with you.
No, it's not something that I've done before, but I've got a small tank that's perfect for it right now. So that it's either going to be that, or it's either going to be an Iwagumi, which I could do a little bit less precise. But
Right. An Iwagumi is about the planning.
yeah,
A Dutch system is about the control.
Yeah.
The constant pruning.
yeah, pruning, maintenance. So
Yeah.
that's not usually my style, but I've got a small tank,
Yeah.
and that's the way to do it for me. It would be you to do a big Dutch tank it's a full-time job.
It is. It's amazing, but wow.
Because those plants
That's a
grow
commitment.
fast.
Yeah.
So you have to keep up with them. And it would be probably 5 or 6 types that I know I like that I can farm.
The people that I know that are competitively doing Dutch style tanks are trimming their tanks 2 to 3 times a week.
Because you have to.
You have to.
Because they're pumping in CO2. They grow that fast. The
Yep.
light is insane.
Yep.
They're getting the maximum color, and they're fertilizing probably daily as well.
It's such a gorgeous look.
Yeah, and I'm gonna like frame this for some people where they're like, "Man, this sounds like a lot of work." Here's the thing: the type of people who like to do that don't view that as work. It's like what's a good analogy? Like people who devote a lot of time to being good at a specific video game.
Yeah.
Like that's just their version of that.
Right.
Yeah.
And so like, if that sounds like work for you, that's not the type of tank for you. Which isn't me trying to discourage you. That's just me saying there's a different type of tank out there for you.
Yeah.
There's a tank for everyone out there. Some people, it's a Dutch tank.
That's not me. I think
No.
they're gorgeous.
But
I
that
know myself well enough to know that I would end up with a jungly mess with like aerial roots coming out of places that you didn't even know they would come from. And oh, look, they've reached the surface again. I'm going to trim those scraggly things. And
But it's to me an exercise in like taking yourself out of it, understanding that you cannot control everything. And I think that's why I don't like it, is because like you need to put in that amount of time to have control. And I will still probably like it just as much if it becomes a giant mess of overgrowth. So
yeah.
it will be a fun challenge for me as the next step in where to take my aquarium development.
That's cool.
Yeah, and I've got the right tank to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
20 gallons is a good size for that.
Yeah, exactly. 20 gallons, bright light. I'd probably need to add on CO2. I don't have that yet.
You
but
would have to for the Dutch stuff. Pick some really small leafed plants as your...
yeah,
Yep.
and good contrast.
Yep.
So that's my next thought.
Mm-hmm.
But for displays, that's all I've got. I don't know. Charles, what are you thinking for a display? You talked a little bit
freshwater
about
display.
that, your betta tank, but
Yeah. I feel like that betta tank would be an amazing display, but I also just love the idea of like big schools of fish. So imagine like a 180 with like, and I'm just trying to think how I want to word this. A lot of people look at tanks and they think, how can I put as many fish as I can in there? And for me, like, the negative space is just as important as the positive space, and like the space between notes is just as important as the notes themselves in music. So I love the idea of like a 180 with like 60 cardinal tetras, because that would give them enough space that you could actually watch them move back and forth as a group across the tank, because there would be enough open space around them for that to be viable.
Mm-hmm.
And then you could have like 20 Adelphi cories on the bottom.
That's the Cory.
Yeah.
and that'd probably keep them sticking to a group versus if you had a group of 200, which you could do in that tank.
Yeah.
Which you could do.
They'd probably kind of split and go foraging. They tend to school when they feel like there's too much space around them. Too much space between fish.
Yeah. But that's kind of the type of behavior that I would want to be trying to replicate in them. Because if you
Yeah.
watch cardinal tetras in the wild, they don't school all day, actually.
Very few fish do.
They will actually form foraging shoals. So a school of cardinal tetras during certain times of the day, when they're least likely to get eaten by something, will break off into groups of like 8 to 12. And they will go looking for bugs or whatever they're looking for. And then they'll meet back up. And I'm just like, that's just so fascinating to me, because I've never kept an aquarium large enough to pull off that behavior.
Yeah.
The closest I've come is I did have a 40 gallon with 30 cardinal tetras in it. And they very much, you could tell that they were like, they had friends and they had their cliques, but there just wasn't enough space for them to be truly distinct and to someone who wasn't watching them several hours a day.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I feel like if you went a little bit larger in the fish group size and way larger in the tank size, you could pull that off.
Can I throw a wrench that you're going to hate just
Probably.
because I'm kind of interested in this whole thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
What if you did that tank with a show pair of discus? There'd be enough room that the tetras could get away and would be encouraged to school.
Especially if they're a wild type discus.
It's true. I think it would discourage the shoaling in between the schooling I like.
It wouldn't let them
right.
do that sort of relaxed phase where they're foraging as much, but it would keep them formed up and schooling fairly well.
You know, I bet if you did a tank that size with rummy nose tetras,
Yeah,
that would be awesome.
it
You'd
would.
probably lose a little less of them to the discus as well.
Yeah. Because the rummy nose are just a little bit more bodied.
But
Like-
then instead of discus, I would do Altum Angels.
Well, yeah, okay, all right. Well, Ben, do you want to talk about your dream display then? Is that what you're trying to say? No, that's a great tank, Charles. And I actually really like that idea of not filling the tank, but allowing them to explore the space in their own way.
Yeah. I don't know. I just think that people, and Robbie and I talk about this a lot, I think people don't think a lot about, like, they look at the fish themselves and what they look like, but not how do they act.
How are they going to behave in the environment?
And that's part of why I like barbs so much, because they have very distinct behaviors. And for me, anyways, it's far easier for me to pick out what their hierarchy is than it is with most tetras. So like the hexazona barbs and stuff that I talk about a lot, I like those because those are so fascinating for me to watch, because I don't know, that's just, they very clearly have an idea of who's in charge and who's not. And it's just interesting to watch.
So cardinal tetras or hexazonobarbs in your dream tank? I mean, which ones?
Probably the cardinal tetras if I was going that big.
Okay.
But if I was doing like a 75 with like 20 of the hexazonobarbs, that would be like the moderate version of this tank. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Because the hexazonobarbs don't really show a true schooling behavior, but they do definitely have clicks. And so I think you wouldn't need to go as big to get that behavior out of them.
That would be a cool tank.
Yeah.
I like it. It's hard to beat a big group of cardinal tetras.
There's just this.
It's how is that? You know, it's one of those amazing conundrums we have in life that when we have something so beautiful and so real, part of why we like it is because it doesn't look real.
A common topic of discussion I have with some of my buddies is, how is this an evolutionary viable option?
Right.
Like in the question of like survival of the fittest, how is that an answer?
Yeah. How is beauty developed when survival is the goal?
Yeah, and it's just it's so fascinating.
Yeah.
The opposite of that works though when you have a sketch artist who can sketch something that is fake but looks so real.
Yeah.
That's one of those one of those big dichotomies in life.
Yeah.
When
We like fake things that look real and real things that look fake.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. When I'm not lying awake at night trying to figure out a rainwater system, I'm lying awake thinking about that dichotomy.
I think one of the craziest examples of that I've ever experienced in my life was I was in an art gallery, and it was literally a picture of like a tube of like industrial lubricant, and my brain said, I was so shocked by it because of everything else in the room that I audibly said, who would take a picture of lube? And then the guy standing next to me leans over and he goes, that's a painting. And I was like,
whoa.
What?
Right.
Because, and then the impressive part of this was like, they had perfectly gotten that shimmer of a wet thing that my brain didn't process it as paint at all.
If
So
it was
that's
a picture
why.
of it, it would look more realistic,
Yeah.
but wouldn't be as impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Human brains are weird.
Right.
Yes.
Yep. How can a cardinal tetra be real? Yeah.
We all just threw our hands up at the same time.
Right.
We can't see it. We have nothing to say.
But,
Yeah.
you know, the bright side is we don't need to answer that question. We can just say they're beautiful and they can go in my tank.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't
Well
know. I
said.
just want more of them.
Yeah.
Well said, Charles. Well said.
Yes, definitely. That was a great point.
Yep. I've spent hours, days, months, years figuring out what like my dream freshwater display, and I think the challenge I have right now, and the reason that I need to own an aquarium store is because that changes on a daily basis. So right now it would be that all out. Let's put all of the cool stuff on it and pay all of the right attention to it, and that would be a rimless 3-foot aquarium. So really, it would be an Aqua Design Amano 90p with a twin star light, an Owazi filter with an internal heater, a CO2 system, and then inside it would be probably Sirius stone, where you know, kind of what you were getting at with your Dutch style or your Iwagumi style, where you're just like every part of that aquarium is thought through. And so to take 200 pounds of Sirius stone, where I'm going to use 30, and spend the time to pick each individual rock and look at the veins of the rock and think of the lines in those veins as arrows where I want my viewer's eye to point, and have every single rock in that tank be done with purpose and intent.
So this is kind of like that the rock structure I've been working on, where like every time we get a shipment of Siriu, I exchange a few, and I have a specific image in my head,
Right.
and I'm getting closer and closer and closer, but I'm not quite there.
Right. I need to just sit down I haven't done like a full on aquascape like that in a really long time. And part of the reason is because I've been learning about and studying so much aquascaping stuff and paying attention to so many of the masters out there that I keep getting too many ideas in my head that I can't focus on one. And so to take the time to focus on, okay, I'm going to use Sirius stone. I'm going to use spiderwood. I'm going to use boost plants with small leaves and start that structure
Yeah.
and see where it goes. It's going to have a subtle but perfectly placed red accent, which, by the way, Karen Randall, if you're listening to this, I know how you feel about red accents, and people use them wrong all the time. They
I'm
use
pretty
it for
sure the phrase is red fetish.
red fetish. Yes, unintentional, dramatic intent. No, done with purpose and intent.
Yes.
Yep. I don't know if I could pull that off. Part of my idea for pulling that off is because there are so many different plants that have different shades of green to red. And if you use that as a fade, where you did have the new Alternanthera renicia mini super red, right, as your final, but you also use like a crypt gecko that super it's
perfect green.
only perfect green, but then you faded in just the right way with a perfect transition all the way to that red with intent inside that tank. I'm doing a lot of hand gesturing here right now, and I realize that Amy and Charles, they can't see you right now, Ben.
No.
But
Welcome to how I feel all the time.
I'm listening because I know, I feel like I know exactly what you're talking about. I think people use red as this sort of like, you've accomplished it. You have red plants. And it's not. It's that in a well-crafted aquascape, red provides a fantastic focal point. But it can't just be out of context.
It's kind of like a seasoning. Like it's like yes, you want it in there, but you don't want that to be the only thing.
It's like adding garlic to a food to make it gourmet, or adding hops to a beer to make it craft brew. Right? If it's done right, it's fantastic. If it's done wrong, you just put hops in it for no reason.
Yeah, and a junky IPA with a ton of hops still tastes like an IPA, but a good one,
Right? Balance
is subtle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's it. There's and actually, honestly, that idea of doing that fade just evolved in my head right now.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of excited about it.
See, that's why I like these discussions, because it's so fascinating to watch those thought process happen in real time.
Yeah.
Well, and we all have our own, like, what is the goal and how do you get to it is so completely different between us.
Like earlier when I was like, oh, that's a great idea. Can I add shrimp to my tank?
Right.
So, serious question. Are you planning on doing something like that in that tank in the corner
Well,
there?
now I'm starting to think about it, but no, not in that tank.
Okay.
So what Charles is looking at is I recently received. Okay, so there's a fun story.
A long
What Charles
one.
is pointing at is, and this is kind of an offshoot story of a dream tank. I actually had a tank that was willed to me, and yes, willed to me.
Yeah.
And it's not like it's this big, huge, valuable, amazing, like they had to put it in their will because, it's this cute little cube tank that this.
Probably what, 40 gallons, 30 gallons?
I think it's actually 26.
26.
Yeah, I haven't actually done it. It's a 20 by 20 by 20 or 24. I don't know. I've got to measure it. This wonderful woman who used to come into the store, off and on for 10 years. She wasn't like an all the time here, but she would come in and we always had just wonderful conversations, and she had great ideas for us, and some of them were actually kind of fun ideas, and we did some of them. And she joked about the fact that, I know none of my kids want my aquarium, and I know it's not that fancy, but I want it to go to somebody who might enjoy it. And about a month ago, I got a call from her daughter, and I had no idea. This wonderful woman was in the store about 2 months ago, and I had no idea anything was up. And she kept joking, "Yep, I'm willing my tank to you." And I laughed with her, and every time I had smiled and laughed with her, I noticed there was a little look in her eye that wasn't quite. She wasn't joking. So the tank is here now. She did pass away. I do not know the details. but I'm going to set the tank up. But she was not a super complex person. So to do that tank in this amazing killer complex way, that would not be the right homage.
No,
Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
It's not the right layout for that tank.
Right.
And I squirreled away some of her fish downstairs because I was like, these are some really nice platies.
She was definitely and honestly, I think this is a good discussion for us to have on this episode. Just because to her, the dream tank wasn't anything crazy or elaborate. This is her tank. She maintained it meticulously. She got the things that she wanted, and when she did, she took care of them in the exact correct way. And in this case, it was platies, a big fat betta, and some really nice, beautiful, well-grown plants. So simple, exactly what she wanted, and she did it perfectly.
It was a beautiful tank, and she loved it.
Exactly. And that's what it's all about. It's just you have the tank that you love.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's something that like a lot of people don't, like not enough people think about, where it's like, what's the tank that I want?
Yeah.
Like,
not the one you saw on Instagram that you're like, oh, that looks really cool, but is that the tank you want to maintain? Are those the fish that you want to interact with? Or is that what you saw somebody set up on a 15-minute sped up video?
or like the flip side is me, Ben, and Amy have thrown out a lot of ideas here, and I know we've been all like, oh, that's a really cool idea. But in the back of I haven't said it, but in the back of mine, I'm like, that's a tank I would never keep, but that's pretty cool.
Sure.
All of those things are wonderful at inspiring us. It doesn't necessarily mean it's something we need to emulate.
Yeah.
So I guess what we were coming to was that's not the way that you're setting up that tank, but you have the idea of the tank that you want. That's the dream.
Right. Yep. Yeah. A rimless, and a tank inspired by Takashi Amano because he was a master.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. That was, I talked about this with you. I showed Alyssa some videos of his work, and like, she's not an aquarist, but that's like a degree of artistry that even she was like, wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, he was a true master, unmatched in our time.
Agreed. Yep. Lots of things. So there are lots of aquariums out there that are looking as good as the aquariums that Takashi Amano did. Notice I'm choosing those. I'm not saying they're as good as, they're not saying they're better. I'm saying they are on that plane. None of those aquariums would have happened had Takashi Amano not have done what he did.
We all had to catch up. Like, like seriously.
Yeah, he can be emulated, but he could never be replaced.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. This was a fun topic, guys.
We had to get a little personal on this one, a little deep.
Yeah. We definitely went off on some tangents, which if you're a regular listener, you know we're good at that.
Yeah, we don't keep focused very long, so I'm assuming that if we do this same podcast in 3 months, we'll have completely different answers.
That's probably true. Well, we definitely want to see some of your ideas. Tell us what some of your dreams are, even if they're outrageous. Tell us about how you would pull off a 2,000-gallon shark tank. Or
or a 20,000-gallon shark tank if you really want to talk about it.
Right. Or a miniature quarter-gallon aquarium that looks like it's a 500-gallon aquarium.
And if you're ready to pull the trigger on your dream tank, but it's like literally just notes on a napkin, bring the napkin in. We want to have that talk with you. Some of the best conversations I've had with any of my customers was like these really crappy like sketchings and being like, because let's just face it, like I'm not an artist, but and just working out with like, oh, okay. So you're going to need a light in like this far away to pull off this lighting. And like, those are the discussions that are really exciting to have.
Or I know this is ridiculous and it would never work, but this is what I want. And then we have the conversation and get down to, yeah, that was ridiculous. It would never work, but this is what you can do.
This is possible.
Yeah. This part of it, the part that really matters.
Or the one guy who wanted to keep Carlton tetras and tiger barbs, and I told him, have you heard of hexazona barbs? And the way his face lit up where he was like, I can have the tank that I want, but it's just a slightly different fish, huh?
Yeah.
And I'm like just those, I love those moments.
Like you can.
If you can dream it.
That's the fun of it. I love having conversations like this with anyone.
Right. That might be the biggest thing now that brings me joy doing aquariums, is having these kinds of conversations.
And we've got all these newbies around the store right now, all these new staff members that you guys might have met.
Excited.
And it's so much fun just seeing somebody get excited about their first coral frag,
Right.
or setting up their planted tank,
Yep.
but really doing it this time.
Right.
And it's so exciting.
Well, there we have it. There's the dream tank discussion from the dream team itself. Check out future podcasts. Subscribe to the podcast. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We love to have these kinds of crazy discussions, but mostly, this is one that I'm really hoping we get some feedback on. I want to hear what.
We'll definitely post a discussion question on Facebook. Yeah. Let's hear about your dream tanks. Yeah. I want to hear it.
Yeah. Thank you very much for listening, everyone, and let's have lots of fun and keep those hands wet.